I think clear communication is the most important thing for running teams remotely.
Hey everyone, welcome to this next episode of the Grow Rogue podcast. I'm Reade Milner. I'm the founder of Rogue Pine, a marketing agency based here in Georgia, and I'm with my wife, Nikki, who is not only my business partner, but she is the COO of the agency. So she's able to discuss things, or she's able to cover topics from a completely different perspective than I am. So we're excited to talk to you about digital marketing, leadership, and content strategy. All right, so I've got a fun question. We get this a lot, or we hear this a lot when it comes to like titles, and does a title even really matter in business? So Nikki, one of your many titles in the business is Chief Operating Officer. You'll also hear me refer to Nikki as the head of operations or the boss, right? But what do you actually do in the business, Nikki?
So my job is to take Reade's strategic ideas, the big ones, the vision casting, things like that, and I make them actionable tasks. So we shrink things down, and I make sure our internal team understands exactly their tasks, their due dates, and all of that will stretch out to the long-term goal. So that's what I do. Reade mentioned that we're a small company, and we're not a multi-million-dollar company yet. However, we do like to function like one. And I mean by roles. We do like to define our roles. So we do not swim in each other's lanes. Now, sometimes when we get vision planning and things like that, yes, it intermingles. But for the most part, day-to-day operations, that's me. Reade is long-term thinking. I'm day-to-day.
From the perspective of the client, right? So your role as COO is sort of an internal role. But as far as the client is concerned, I think your title might be more appropriately like project manager or head of client services, if we use, a very agency-like term. But what does your role look like as it relates to the client work that we do?
Yeah, so the term that comes to mind is client manager. So I manage the client. So what does that look like? I'm responsible for all agendas, internal and on the client. So when we come to these client meetings, Reade and I have already discussed exactly what we're talking about. I make sure he's prepared because sometimes me and the client, we will have communications, and they put expectations on us that I need to make sure our team and Reade and whoever else is on that call is prepared for. And then after the call, I take those tasks and make sure, again, everyone knows the roadmap in which to get to the bigger goal. And that's what I do on a client perspective. And again, on sales, I do come in also, and I just explain the process. So I'm big on processes. I build all our processes. So it's almost like a pre-client management on sales roles. So Reade will, again, vision cast, and I just tell him, hey, this really is real, and this is how we plan to get that done.
All right, Nikki, what is your favorite productivity tip?
Okay, it's time blocks. And since there are different ways to do this, and if it's intimidating to start with 3 different time blocks and all of that, I challenge you to do one block, maybe 2 hours. So 9 to 12, right? So just focus on, do it tomorrow. Put it on your calendar and block it off and say what tasks you're going to work on, right? And be conservative, maybe 3 or 4 tasks in that 2-hour block, right? And just try it. When that time block is up, move on to something else, right? Just try it one time. I challenge you.
So Nikki, what exactly is a time block?
Okay, a time block is as simple as it seems. It is a block of time in which you pre-schedule to work on certain tasks.
Nikki, what's a favorite productivity hack that you like to share?
Okay, another one is put everything on your calendar. It does not mean the calendar owns you. You tell it what to do. But it really has been a game changer in our business and our personal life. Just start on Monday, plan 4 days or 5 days, right? Or maybe even the next day. Just plan the next day. Put everything you plan to do on the calendar. This also ensures, this is like a little extra hack. If you've already planned it for the next 3 days and you know exactly what you have to do, your Calendly or anything linked to your calendar, people will not be able to schedule calls with you, right? They can choose the next week. Guess what? Now you've just scheduled out a week where you don't have unexpected calls.
Reminds me of a great quote. How do you know what a person really values? Check 2 things, their bank account and their calendar. Where do they spend their money? Where do they spend their time? All right, Nick. So we obviously work remotely from all of our clients and from our team. What are some of the things that we have done to make that work as well as it possibly can without being able to see and talk to people in person on a regular basis?
Yeah, so it's all about clear communication and building trust. We do use things like Zoom, Slack, but it really is consistency. So each week we have a standing team meeting. It's every Monday. And really, it's just to touch base with people, make sure everyone understands the clear due date and what they're being asked to do. And it's just a little checkpoint. Each week we have it. And I think clear communication is the most important thing for running teams remotely.
One thing that we've done, in my opinion, to really help the remote work aspect of our agency is that we have a very clear structure of communication. A lot of that you have created, Nikki, all of that you've created, so that we're able to bring certain things up for discussion at an appropriate time and not have it like bogged down like all day long in Slack. We've talked about this in the past, right? So everybody feels like they can bring things into a meeting at an appropriate time, or we can talk about things at an appropriate time, and then we have all these back-end systems to make sure that the content is shared, the work is shared in an organized way so that nobody loses stuff.
And yeah, to piggyback off that a little bit, we've mentioned our time blocks, we've mentioned all our monthly meetings and things like that. But one thing specifically with our team meetings, I typically, and Reade will do this too, we'll pull up the agenda throughout the week and we'll add things to it. So we're not constantly pinging people on Slack. Now, there are times where we need something or we need a question answered that day, but we really try not to ping people throughout the day. We wait till Monday, and then on the agenda I have all the things that I had throughout that week. Because again, we're so ahead of schedule, nothing is that pressing, and that is a low stress environment, and that's what we want. How do we manage compliance without it slowing down the marketing? So we work with a lot of financial advisors. So talk about compliance and marketing.
Yeah, so the key to working with compliance departments, right? If you're in a heavily regulated industry like financial services or healthcare or some similar ones, you're going to have to get everything approved, or at least you're going to have to get some sign off from legal, if you will. So one of the things that we've done, or some of the things that we've done to really make that process a whole lot easier is, first of all, getting way out ahead of it. You've got to get in your head that everything that goes out on social media, everything that goes out as an email, everything that goes on the website really needs to be written, approved, or created and approved and planned weeks in advance. So that's one of the things that we do to make sure that we stay out ahead of things. Nikki, I would actually be curious about your perspective on this, because you've done a lot of things from an organizational standpoint, kind of the nuts and bolts behind that organization that really have helped this both for ourselves and for our clients that are dealing with compliance. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
So from an operations standpoint, we do, like you mentioned before, we like to stay about 30 days ahead. This just, in many different reasons, this helps a smooth process, but it does, if there is a little hiccup and, we don't want to do that, we send it over for approval, and it's like, we can't do that one. That's okay. We have backups. But I will also say a way around it that we've seen is personal stories. Such as, a life insurance agent delivering a check to a widowed person. That compliance is always okay with, because we're not talking about specifics. We're not trying to be the know-it-all person and things like that. So stories are always helpful, and again, staying ahead.
Another thing that we've done to really decrease the amount of work that the compliance departments have to do is we make sure that the content is personalized to the individuals that are on video, meaning it's a conversation between those two, usually not touching on heavily regulated topics. For example, a financial advisor having a conversation with a client about how the plan that they help them to put together has enabled them to live the retirement that they want. We're not talking about markets. We're not talking about products. We're just talking about life experiences.
Okay, switching gears a little bit to the marketing side, Reed, what kind of return should businesses really expect from their marketing efforts? And let's start with beginning marketers and then people who've been doing it for a while.
When it comes to the ROI that you should expect from your marketing investment, I like to go about this actually in reverse order. The typical business is spending about 10% of their gross revenue on marketing. So what does that tell us, right? From a high level view, it says that we ought to be generating about a 10x return on our marketing investment. That's not always seen in direct sales from marketing efforts. And this is where the nuance comes in. So when we're talking about a marketing investment, we're thinking about things like brand. We're thinking about advertising, but we're also thinking about content and lead nurturing and all those different aspects that go into the growth of the business. Not all of those things turn people into customers in a short enough time frame to be calculated in terms of that ROI, right? So what we advise is that you look at your marketing spend versus your top line revenue growth on an annualized basis. And with increases in marketing, there should be a commensurate increase in that top line revenue, especially when you stretch out kind of the viewpoint, the timeline that you're looking at, so that all those efforts have had time to actually contribute to the growth of the business.
This one's a two-tiered question. So first talk about what is an open rate and what is versus a click-through rate, and then talk about the percentages of each and what should they be at for email marketing.
All right, so I'm going to break these down real quick and give a definition of both. So the first one is, what is an open rate when you're talking about email marketing? An open rate is very simply the percentage of your subscribers who received an email that opened the email. So a 25% open rate on a list of 1,000 people means 250 people opened the email. Now we have to do some deductive. We have to deduce whether or not they actually read the thing, right? And there's some nuance there. 10 years ago, you could be pretty confident that if you had a 20% open rate, 20% of your list was opening and at least looking through that email. We can't be as confident these days. There's a lot of these bots that will open and do security checks on every single piece of mail that comes through an inbox, and it looks like that's increasing the open rate, but it's not actually a human being that's looking at that email. So what we say is that it used to be that 20% was kind of a benchmark open rate for emails. We say 40 is the new 20. We strive for at least 40% open rates on all of the email marketing that we do. Next term that I want to define for you is click-through rate. So we've talked about open rates in the past. To differentiate, click-through rate is the percentage of people that opened your email that clicked on one of the links in the email. Now, this is where you've got to be smart about how you structure your email content. For example, if you're filling it with links and you're sending people to a bunch of different directions, well, then you might want to consider how important or how useful the click-through rate is on that piece of content. For example, one of our newsletters where we're promoting, a podcast episode, a blog post, we're sending people to curated content. Click-through rate is not really a useful metric for, let's say a conversion objective. But if we're sending an email that is specifically about, say, an upcoming webinar, and that's the only thing that we're linking to, well, then it makes sense for us to consider the click-through rate in terms of how successful was that email campaign. Something we've been doing for a while now is pushing this concept that we call We Build Newsletters. We built a whole service offering around it. What brought that about? What was the impetus for creating We Build Newsletters?
Yeah, so Reed and I looked, and there was a real need that we saw, right? And we're innovators, right? We like to see, wow, okay, this is a consistent thing that our clients are needing. Let's build it, right? So everyone's focused on social media. So we thought, okay, it's old, and sure, many marketing agencies are doing it, but not consistently. So we said, let's build a service offering that offers newsletters. And this way we can own our audience. And Reade's already talked about the many benefits of newsletters, but that's how it came about. We saw a need and we fulfilled it. Okay, so I shared my thoughts on newsletters. So how did it come about in your mind that we really needed to add newsletters as a specific offering?
Well, one of the things that we realized was that most of our clients were one, they were getting like the biggest benefit of all their marketing channels was coming from email, right? And it was usually an inconsistent thing that they were trying to do when they had time, or they felt like they should be doing it, but they weren't. And so we said, well, that seems like real low-hanging fruit. We can get a lot of results. We can help our clients get a lot of benefit just by having a consistent email marketing and a newsletter that they were putting out on a monthly or a weekly basis. And we solved one of the big problems that they had was we don't have time to do it, or we can't come up with the content. So we just said, look, what if we just turn on the camera and we ask them questions, or we have a couple of them on camera and they have a discussion about something, and we take that content and we use that to create a bunch of email, a bunch of newsletters that can go out, a couple weeks, couple months in advance. And that brought a huge amount of benefit, responses, new business opportunities for clients like overnight. So we said we need to productize this and roll this out to anybody that is interested in this.
Okay, Reade. So oftentimes in these internal meetings, we talk about this stair-step marketing, right? We start small and then we constantly add things to it. Talk a little bit about the stair-step marketing.
Okay, so there are a few things that you just have to be doing in order to have a real effective digital marketing strategy. Kind of the base level stuff is you need to be visible and active on social media, right? That's a no-brainer, but you need to be doing it consistently. The next level up is you really ought to have some sort of a consistent, expected email process, like a newsletter. Even if it's just a company newsletter that goes out on a monthly basis, we really like weekly for emails. And then the next level, and this is like Jedi level, is a regular video content as a part of your strategy. So this could be conversations between two or more people in the company. It could be a conversation with someone in the company and a client, but there needs to be that video component because so much of social and so much of what we consume in terms of content is in the form of video.
So one of the questions we get a lot, and I think there's a misconception here, is, well, my social media gets 1 to 2 likes and it's just frustrating, and what should I do about it, right? What is the solution?
So I want you to think about your content output, not so much as, you're casting a line into the water and you're hoping to catch a fish with each cast. I want you to think about more as a catalog of trust building, meaning when someone does find you and they come through the top of your funnel, one of the next things they're going to do is they're going to go look at what you have done. And the best way to find that is, what have they posted on social? For them to then go back through and see maybe even just articles on your website. But in a lot of cases, it's, well, I found them on LinkedIn. What are they posting on LinkedIn? You want that to really inspire that trust between you and that potential customer, that prospect, that member of your audience right away.
And what do we call it?
We call that lead trust.